G'day groovers, rockers, and in between. This is Vinyl Vibes. I'm your host, Jack Hodgins. Today we are talking with singer-songwriter Kevin Johnson on Vinyl Vibes today. Kevin began his career after being discovered by Col Joye in the mid-1960s and was soon signed to Joye's publishing company. By 1967, Kevin had moved to Sydney and released his first singles. His first big hit came in 1971 with his song Bonnie Please Don't Go. Following this 1971 hit, for the next 2 years, Kevin would not release any music, however. After those 2 years passed, however, in 1973, he would release what would become his biggest hit single, Rock and Roll, I Gave You All the Best Years of My Life. More recently, Kevin has released his 10th album in 2019, The Devil Found Work, and has just published his first novel, Deep Decisions, in 2023. G'day, Kevin, and welcome to Vinyl Vibes.
Great to be with you.
Let's start off at the beginning, Kevin. You were born in 1942 in Rockhampton, Queensland. Do you remember much about your childhood?
Yes, quite vividly. I had a very good childhood. Lived out in the country in a place called Tungamull, mainly also Kawonga, but a place called Tungamull, which was like halfway between Rockhampton and the coast. And I had a great time there. Yeah.
And I've read that your mum was a good violinist. Were you a musical family?
Not really. My father would play the leaf that they used to get at any functions that were on a bit, but I'm singing the bass maybe. And my mother was a good violin player. She tried to teach me the violin, but I was more interested in watching the kids playing outside. And so in the end, she said, put it away. But she was a good violin player, yes.
Yeah, look, I've read that you didn't get into music until your later teens, but do you remember much like the music that you were kind of listening to like early on?
The main one was, I suppose, going to high school. I was aware of one of my favourite records. It was Elvis Presley's The Heartbreak Hotel, which still retains that place in terms of early rock and roll. It was one of the great records, and Roy Orbison's Only the Lonely. That was the one that turned it all around for me. So after that, I bought the voice guitar and went on this journey.
What was it about Roy Orbison that kind of really resonated with you so much relative to like Elvis and all the other kind of rock and rollers that just didn't like resonate as much?
Well, there was a uniqueness to the whole Orbison thing because he worked with the right producer and it all came together. It was a combination of an amazing voice, amazingly original sort of songs that were sort of uniquely Orbison and the guy he used to write with. The production, the Claire Poole, I think it was Claire Poole or something, I can't remember. She used to write the strings and also did all the vocal arrangements. It was a combination of many things in those early Orbison records, but certainly there was an amazing originality and something different to the Only the Lonely, which was the first one off the turntables for him anyway.
Yeah, and of course, you mentioned in Rock and Roll I Gave You All the Best Years of My Life that you brought all the 78s and all. I mean, were those 78s in those days that you were kind of using, not the 45s?
Well, a little bit of license there, but I'm not sure if they had any 78s, but yes, I did, of course. Yes, I did. But yes, I didn't have any, not necessarily the ones that I might have mentioned, but when you're writing songs, you don't stick strictly to the truth.
No, of course. I mean, when did you get that first guitar then?
I have absolutely no idea. It was a cheap thing I bought at some second-hand shop, and but then, of course, I heard about somebody was selling a Fender Jaguar and an amp that went with it, and I bought that. So I went from a lowly rated thing to a great instrument. Yeah.
Was it pretty soon after that getting that Fender Jag that you joined the Candymen?
Yeah, so I was doing pubs at that stage in Rockhampton, singing at hotels, and friends of mine were in this band, and so they asked me to join, and that's how I come into the Candymen. We used to sing not all the Beatles, but a lot of the Beatles songs, and Rolling Stones were favourites of ours, yeah.
So when did you get into songwriting? What was the point in your life when you kind of started writing your own stuff?
About that time, I think I was writing songs and sending them away to people, and that's how that's how it started. So I think I wrote one that we maybe attempted a few times to do with the Candymen, but I was, as I said, sending them to people at that time, like Col Joye and the Jacobson family and Johnny Chester, who said, "Oh, I'm going to record something fantastic. I'm going in to record it now." And 40 years later, he rang me up and said, "I've just finished it."
Oh,
Which
wow.
was quite amazing, but at least he finished it. That's the great thing.
Yeah, no, definitely. And you mentioned Col Joye there, and I know that like you were kind of discovered by him, and you're kind of signed to his record label. Like, how did that all kind of come to be?
Well, they used to come through every year on a tour of Queensland, which I did with them one year. On a train, they'd get shunted off at the different places and go and do the show. And then it was a great idea. You had your own cabin and whatever, and you lived in it for 30 days, as we did. And so I'd meet up with them on a couple of occasions, and we'd discuss all these things and play the songs. And from there, they got me down. I started recording with them, and that was it. I had "Woman You Took My Life" was the first thing I did with them, and that got released in straight away in England, and picked up then by Tom Jones, and so that was the start of our association.
What was your writing process back then, and has it changed like since then?
No, no, it hasn't really changed. It's still floundering around in the dark, but just it hasn't really changed. Start up with an idea that could be melodic, or it could be a combination. Usually, the best ones are a combination of the words and the music at the same time, and then of course you've got to finish it off.
Do you lean more towards the lyrics and the music side of things?
Possibly. I find with lyrics, they can take forever. I've spent months just pondering over one line that I didn't like, and coming at it from different angles and whatever. Whereas melodically, it either sort of makes sense or it doesn't fairly quickly. You know what I mean?
Mm.
But anyway, that's generally the way it works. But there's variations in everything you do, So.
And I've read that you relocated to Sydney in 1967. I mean, at that point, was Sydney the musical capital of Australia?
Pretty well. That Sydney and Melbourne, pretty much the dominating areas in that area, in that field. So I guess, and also I had a strong association with the Jacobsons ATA label and whatever. So it was obvious that, and we were great friends with the Joy Boys drummer and his wife. So we stayed with them at first, and then close by as well. So Sydney was the obvious choice, yes. And so that's how we come to move.
Was it a big change from Rockhampton?
Well, we went first to Brisbane. I moved to Brisbane first, and then my parents moved down to Brisbane. So, and then my wife Jill and I stayed with my parents for a while in Brisbane, and then we moved to Sydney. So it would have been a bigger move directly from Rockhampton, but it was like Brisbane's a big place too, so wasn't such a big transition in terms of size of cities. No.
You mentioned your song "Woman You Took My Life" a little earlier, and I'm just thinking, I think that came out in April 1968 as a single for you. Do you remember much about the recording of that song, like the process back then?
Well, actually, the one that came out then was a different version. I've probably still got a version of it somewhere in a storage or something, but that isn't the one that ended up on the rock and roll album, but it was a re-recording on the rock and roll album. But I remember the first one that came out. Alan Dean was involved. I think he was the MD, and then, as I said, we re-recorded the whole thing for the rock and roll album.
That song was also covered by Tom Jones. I think you mentioned it a little earlier. I think it was 1972. He covered that song. I mean, is it meaningful to you as a songwriter when people cover your work?
Yes, very much. I mean, you like every version that's done. Some are better than others, of course, but there's been a lot of cover versions of my songs over the years, and each one has its own merit.
Yeah, and I did some reading into your first album, in the quiet corners of my mind. Came out in 1969, and it was produced by Jimmy Stewart. I've read too that you produced after that album. You mostly produced your own albums after that, and I'm thinking, like, what did you learn from Jimmy Stewart on the production side of things, like during your first album?
Well, Jim was one of those guys that if he believed in something, he'd mortgage his house and back his judgment. So he was a pretty brave character in that regard. A classic case of that was we were recording Bonnie Please Don't Go when I was working with him on that. Bonnie Please Don't Go, She's Leaving. And we'd worked on it for some time. We were in the studio and one night and I said, it's still not working. It just doesn't work the way we've done it somehow. And he said, well, let's just do it again. And so he was more or less in charge of the finances. So, I've always got him to thank for that because Fraternity was in the room at the time, which was Bon Scott's first band. And he obviously was there as well. And Jimmy had a talk with him and said, can you do the rhythm track for this song? So they did straight away and pretty well much one take, I think it was. But so those were things that I admired about Jim. He was prepared to go with whatever needed to be done. And anyway, as I said, they did the rhythm track, and of course, then we put all the brass and all of that stuff on top of it, which all is part of the plan for the song anyway. So,
did you take to the tape machines, like the old analog tape machines, pretty quickly?
Oh well, I had tape recorders from day one when I was back in the Candymen. In those days, I was recording things on tape recorders. So it was just an extension of that, like you got 2 tracks on the old ones, and you got 24 tracks in the studio. So, it was just a matter of expanding everything and letting your head go crazy, which we all did.
Yeah. And look, you mentioned Bonnie, Please Don't Go, She's Leaving, and that was like at that time, that was your biggest hit up to that point. What was that like for you, having such like relatively a pretty big hit in Australia?
Yeah, that was good. It was also a hit in America for a guy called Jim Ed Brown, who was a country artist. He had a big hit with it in American country charts, and it was enormous for me in Canada, but they never got the records out until after the whole thing had settled down. I remember Sandy Scott, coming back from Canada and saying, it's amazing. It's the most requested song in the whole of Canada. And but anyway, I signed with a record company over there straight after Bonnie Please Don't Go, and it was also part of a publishing deal. And so finally we parted company, but that was what happened there. But it was successful overseas, yes, as well.
Was it hard for Australian artists at that time to have successes overseas?
Yes, it all depends. It all comes down to each individual person or each individual song or whatever. At the time, something like that one was easy. It just sort of was a hit here and then sort of took off over there as well. And the same with rock and roll. It was virtually easy. And the next one, you say, might be 10 times, 100 times more difficult.
After that song, you signed with that American publishing deal. That was in 1971, and there was a kind of a gap between like 1971 and 73 where you didn't have any releases, I don't think. What were you kind of doing during that time? Were you writing a lot?
That gap, 1971 to 1973, was something that brought about rock and roll. I gave you the best years of my life to a certain extent, in that I had a number one record, was close to number one, number two in various states in Australia and also in America for Jim Ed Brown. And I didn't follow it up with anything because I'd signed an exclusive deal with the publishing company and Dial Records at the same time. They were waiting for the magic song that they wanted to lynch it all on, attach it all to. And by the time I wrote rock and roll, I was getting disenchanted with it all. And this was part of the motivations that pushed me in that direction to write that particular song on the day. There was like 2 years following a big hit with nothing. And so that's how it come about. So it was 1971 to 1973 where I didn't release anything. It was amazing.
I've read that it didn't take you very long to write rock and roll at all. Take me through that writing process.
Well, I got the idea of driving home. We were living in DY in Sydney at the time, and riding home, we were living in a flat and down near the beach. We had 2 children by that stage, Shane and Scott, who I wrote songs about later on. To get away from, they were playing with the kids or something from next door, and to get away from them, I used to go out and write in the storeroom at the back, which had all the tools for the maintenance guys who'd come along and maintain. So I was out there with shovels and picks and whatever. And that's where I finished rock and roll off in the sort of gardening storeroom. So, but still it worked. So I'm looking for a gardening storeroom now to try and emulate the the possibilities. Yeah.
In that gardening storeroom, when you kind of, you finished writing it, did you get the feeling it might be a hit at all? Like, was there that feeling at all?
I thought it had the possibilities. I'll be quite honest. I thought it had the possibilities of doing things. And when I played it to the guys in the record company, they immediately thought so as well. And when I played it, I went into a studio one day. The engineer Bruce Brown rang me up and said, "You should come in. We may be able to use these guys with a band called Cool Bananas with Rory O'Donoghue and Russell Dunlop, Wayne Finlay, and G. Stein Boddington." And I went in, and they said, "Well, let's hear one of the songs." And I played them. They said, "Let's do it now." I mean, they jumped at it straight away. And so everyone that sort of come in contact with it at the start thought it was going to be a hit.
Yeah, and of course when you recorded that song, I've been listening to the song again and again, trying to pick up little things here and there. And I mean, did you record that live in the in the studio all at once, or did you do overdubs after you recorded the basic track, or how did that go?
Yeah, the last is the scenario. As I said, this band was in there recording their own stuff, and when they heard this song, they said, "Well, let's do it now." So we went out. They went straight out with no rehearsal whatsoever, and they laid it recording down in if just 2 or 3 takes. It was perfect. So after that, of course, then we put strings. I worked with the keyboard player who I'd had association with a little bit before that, and the strings were done, and then I put vocals on and whatever else went on it. I can't remember now, but and Rory did the lead guitar work on the day, and so that's all come about. It was very quick because this was the last song I ever sent to Tree Publishing. I rang them up trying to stall them because I didn't want any versions to go out in America before I could get there. And they said, "Well, we've got 6 versions going out next week or 2 weeks' time or something." So we had this recorded, finished, and sent over to America and had it out, and actually was in the charts before they got any of the versions out. It was amazing timing. We were in a big hurry because we knew, as I said, there were a number of versions coming out of it.
Yeah, and of course, I was just thinking about this the other day. I was looking at the song, and I mean, 5 minutes 30 in length, and I think it's great that back then songs of that length could do very well. I mean, whereas now, songs are getting shorter. I think the average pop song is now 3 minutes 30. I mean, why do you think songs are getting shorter? What's going on there?
Well, it's come back. When we first took it in, I think, to somebody who was the program manager. He shall remain unnamed. But he looked at it, having known me from the past, and just threw it onto his desk with disgust and said, "Well, what are you going to do for the next one?" He said, 5 minutes, 26 seconds long. What are you going to do for the next one? And I mean, sort of like, so much for that one. But I have to give radio their credence in this. They immediately jumped on it. Australia did play it very well. And this happened everywhere. And then later in England, UK Records cut it down to about 3 minutes 40 or something, and did a version exactly the same, but just took something out of it. And it was a hit too. So, it's the original that has lasted. Yeah.
Oh, definitely. I mean, it sounds like, then even back in the 70s, that longer songs then were some people, like you mentioned, managers and maybe some radio stations. It was a bit of a problem back then, even then, not just now, that longer songs don't.
It all comes down to the financial aspect of it, in that if you got a song that's going 2 minutes longer than everyone else, that's 2 minutes of advertising dollars you're not getting. Yep. So it's a trade-off, of course. Yeah, certainly they're shorter songs now, but things like Bohemian Rhapsody and I don't know, some Bye Bye Mr. American Pie, and they sort of gone around it. Hey Jude, So there have always been those ones. And there's a reason why some songs are long. They have to be. It doesn't work in the shortened version.
Yeah, and look, of course, I mean, especially with rock and roll, I mean, it tells a story, and I think to cut out anything of that story. Kind of like, yeah, kind of doesn't.
Exactly. Yeah. So, but anyway, it's the shortened version did well. It was high on the UK charts and other places maybe. But generally, in the long term, the longer version has been the one that's still with us, sort of thing.
Rock and roll is a song that, I think, it was written during a time when people really appreciated music and valued music. I mean, do you, as someone who was kind of back then and is kind of here now, looking on music today and how people interact with it, do people value music as much as they did, or do they appreciate it and love it as much as they did?
I think things slightly changed in that back then, I don't know, there was a more lasting quality to things, perhaps. Picking out the Beatles, who are favourites of all time, I guess. There was such great quality to their stuff that will live forever, you would think. I'm not sure a lot of the things of today will last as long as that, put it that way. They have a shorter span, perhaps, I don't know, but certainly there is a difference, I suppose, and the computer age has changed people's attitude as the way back then. If something sold 1 million copies, it was great, but now people get 1 billion streams or something. So
yeah,
these have all changed, and it's the social media thing where one person is feeding it onto somebody else and whatever it is. So it's all slightly different. Hard to play one against the other.
By this point, when rock and roll was a success, I mean, you've gone and done, so many things in music by that point. I mean, and you say in your song Rock and Roll, you say, I told my mum her only son was going to be a star. I mean, were your parents pretty happy with the work you were doing? And like,
yeah, I used to do, as I said, I used to sing at a beer garden up there, and on Saturday nights they usually come to the beer garden. It was a very well run beer garden. I went on to another couple of places that were like something out of Star Wars and those saloon days, but they used to come, and it was, as I said, a very well run thing. They'd come and listen, and so they were always very, very supportive, yes, in everything I did.
Listening to and the album Rock and Roll gave you the best years of my life, the album, I was listening to some of the songs of that, like Iridescent Shadows and Shiny Boy, and it sounds like, by this point you're in your early 30s, and I'm thinking, was this a time in your life when you were kind of reflecting on life a lot? Because I think these songs are kind of like, they're kind of written and they kind of tell a story, and they're kind of like about how fast life goes. I mean, were you reflecting on that factor at this point? Yeah.
Yeah, I guess so. I guess there's always been an element of that in the stuff that I write. So, well, some songs anyway, and there were quite a number of reflective songs in certainly in that rock and roll album. But they were written over a certain amount of time, and not necessarily just prior to the album being recorded. I had a number of those songs that sort of were there and available. I've still got some that haven't been recorded since then. So, but certainly there was a reflective quality in some of those songs. Yeah, I was paid by that American publisher, Tree Publishing and Dial Records, just to write songs. They wanted me to live in Nashville, and I said, "Oh no, I'll live back in Australia." So they paid me a weekly advance against future royalties just to write songs. I only wrote 8 songs in 2 years, so they never complained. The guy who was running the show, Buddy Killen, he was very of the belief that when he picked someone, they'd come up with the goods eventually, and well, in this case, it made them a lot of money, yes. So, the catalogue did. So, I was writing songs then that I used in that rock and roll and the Man of the 20th Century albums, and I guess other albums since then as well. So it's reflective of a certain time, but also a certain mentality that's still with me, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, and of course you mentioned your third album there, Man of the 20th Century, and I listened to a great song off that, Scotty, which you wrote for your son. And this is something I love about your songwriting, Kevin, is that, and especially, and it's evident on this song, is that you write about life in a way which is, I think, very truthful. Like, and what I mean by that is that you don't hold back on maybe some of the hardships that comes with life, but you also kind of mentioned also the greatness that.
Yeah, well, my first in my second album, that was the rock and roll album, I had a song called Shaney Boy, which was a big hit for me in Ireland and part of England as well. Of course, we had two boys, so I was obvious. I had to write one for my youngest son as well. But what's in there, I think, is what goes through a parent's mind, and certainly it was hopefully capturing the emotions that are involved in such activities, and certainly both songs. In fact, I've now had an album out a couple of years ago called "The Devil Found Work," in which I had 4 songs dedicated to our grandchildren. My wife Jill and I have 4 granddaughters. Lola, Saskia, Emmy, Lou, and Gypsy, and there was a song each for them on that. And so, it's a trend that I've continued on.
Yeah. Oh, brilliant. No, that's brilliant. And of course, I think it was following that album, Man of the 20th Century, you did your first international tour in 1976. I mean, were audiences across the world like different to Australian audiences, and how the audience kind of responded to your songs?
Yeah. Yeah, very much so. I did some concerts. We went for, say, 10 years, where we'd go every year to Europe. I did mainly television. I don't know how many television shows I did over those years, but each year I went, it was mainly television. I did some shows across Ireland, and I did a couple in England, I think, and maybe Germany as well. But I did a lot of shows in Ireland, I don't know how many concerts, but generally, I think if something works here, it generally works there, So I'm talking about, say, if you have a show if you're doing a show at a theatre where people have paid money and they're sitting in a theatre, then it's pretty well the same, I think, everywhere. But if you go to some pub, like I was mentioning, my early days, where it's like carnage going on in the audience, then it's a different matter. But it pretty well is the same, I think, pretty well.
Yeah, look, and following that, I listened to your 4th album, Journeys, and I was looking at the front cover, and it's, I think you're in a desert somewhere. It looks like a desert from what I can see. Like, where was that photo taken?
Cronulla somewhere. I can't remember exactly where, but the photographer Ray Hall, who came with me on the day, he'd picked the spot out, so I just sort of followed him or went with him. But it was on a beach down there somewhere. I don't know where we were living at the time. Maybe I don't know. We've lived in a few suburbs in Sydney, but anyway, it was down there somewhere. We just found the sand dune. In fact, the front cover was supposedly me on top of a sand hill where you could see the blue sky behind me. It was a great shot, but the record company rejected it for some reason or something. I don't know why they didn't, but they went with that one instead. But anyway, that's what we ended up with. But the whole album had a sort of a timelessness about it. There was one on there about Oleanders, about the American Civil War, and there was another, Love Knows Where to Find You. It's got a very French sort of 30s feel about it. And The Next Plane to New Mexico was another song on there, which is obviously about New Mexico. So it was all about journeys in direction, in terms of direction and time as well. So that was the idea behind that album.
Yeah, no, of course. And look, yeah, I think it's fair to say that you're obviously a storyteller, and looking on music today, do you think that music is missing storytellers?
Yeah, to a certain extent. They come back to that short sort of ditty type, a lot of the things these days, and having 40 dancing girls standing behind somebody or whatever, to a certain extent in the video clips. So, storytelling has taken a bit of a back seat, I think, in times. I mean, if you think back over the great storytellers, Harry Chapin was one of them, and, so many, well, of course, Dylan and whatever. But, hopefully it'll re-emerge. I think that there are saturation points all along the line with these things, and it does come down to telling stories. And I guess storytelling, I suppose, has always been in my mind. When I first heard this, I always thought I might write a book, and which I have finally, after 1,000 years, I have finally done, and it's just out now, and which is my first novel.
Yeah.
It's a bit of variation from from songwriting, but it's just hit the stands now. It's on Amazon now, so
Yeah. Oh, fantastic. Can people get it through your website as well, or?
no, not yet.
Not
It will be attached to the website now, but it's on Amazon, which is of course worldwide. It's out in every country in the world immediately as of a few days ago, and it's called Deep Decision. It's Kevin Johnson, and it's as I said, on Amazon. All they have to do is write in Amazon and Deep Decisions, Kevin Johnson, and up it comes, sort of thing. It's on paperback and ebook, whatever you call where you read it on the computer, whatever. But anyway, that's a deviation. I just thought when you're talking about storytelling, I sort of come to mind.
No, that's great. Yeah. No, that's fantastic. Yeah, and I'm just kind of thinking, like, are there any storytellers today, like more modern storytellers that you like, or is it just not? Are they just not there?
One of my problems is I never listen to music and probably never much listen to radio or anything. When we're going out driving, as my wife Jill and I were driving somewhere to Sydney or Melbourne or whatever, then we take a collection of CDs and we play them as we're going along. Makes the trip go quicker. But, I guess mainly it's dominated by the singer-songwriters. Gordon Lightfoot is another favourite. Bob Dylan, the Beatles, Queen. The list goes on forever.
Yeah.
Van Morrison, anybody who is a legendary name in not necessarily now, but certainly of a few years ago. They'd be on the list. Vince Gill's another one. The list goes on. So
Yeah.
we have a sort of a same collection of things that we play, but whether it's died out, it probably will. As I said, everything is to a certain extent cyclical, so hopefully it'll work that way.
Look, we're talking about journeys, and there was one song in there that really stuck out to me. I was listening to the album, and then this song for me came out of nowhere. All Our Favorite Songs, it's called, and why it really resonated with me because I was thinking it sounds very different to the other tracks, at least to my ears. And I mean, because I think there's a synthesizer at the start, or what sounds like a synthesizer. I mean, what were you trying to do, like with that song? It sounds like you were experimenting production-wise a little bit.
Once again, I recorded that early in the day with the ATA, which was the Col Joye and the Jacobson family label. But then I redid it, and the vocal backing there was something that came to the minds of Wayne Finlay, who was the keyboard player I always worked with, and Doug Ashdown, who was in the studio at the same time. That business, and so that sort of come about in the making of the song. But the original song was All Our Favorite Songs, was based on the Bee Gees returning to Australia in a triumphant way. And I thought that in their early days, it wasn't so easy for them here. But of course, when they come back, everybody wanted to be their friend, sort of thing. So there is a little bit of cynicism in that particular song, yes.
Yeah, and look, when you as in production wise, I mean, like as tape machines like got more and more tracks, I think by 1978 I think 24 track tape might have been available by then in Australia. But did you always try to utilize those tracks? Like when more tracks became available, did you feel like, oh, let's use those extra tracks, or did you kind of keep it simple?
No, well, I always tried to keep it as simple as possible. If you've got a number of tracks and you can think, well, this could maybe help this or whatever, then you'd go for it. But I certainly never ever filled it up just because there were available tracks. I remember, but then of course your own madness can take over. I remember with a song called "Friends of Mine," which was in a later album called "In the Spirit of the Times." It was about three of my heroes, early heroes, James Dean, and then Roy Orbison, and then the Beatles. We had two 24-track tapes lined up in sync, And so we had 48 tracks,
Yeah.
or 46 tracks, and there were maybe two with the automation happening, or I forget to sync them up. I'm not sure, but we had around that number of tracks. It was unbelievable. And anyway, whether it worked or not is up to up to the beholder. But that was that's what madness can do for you. Yeah.
Yeah, and look, you mentioned that album in the spirit of the times too, and you kind of mentioned that cyclical kind of thing with music, and I think the '80s was certainly very different to the '70s. I mean, was it like what was that experience like for you during the '80s? Because I mean, the music that was kind of popular was definitely changing. I mean, how was all that for you? Yeah.
Well, it was changing, yes, and sort of the storyteller songwriter was maybe predominant in the late 60s, certainly the 70s was always so it all changed. You had great people like I don't know, Robert Palmer. I think he was in the 80s or whatever. He was a favorite of mine, and slightly changed, but once again it all come down to what you did, and if it worked, it worked, and if it didn't, the lapse of the gods decide these things. So I never noticed any great change, except that you did what you did, and it was accepted, or it didn't do so well.
Yeah. Okay. No. Yeah. Because I was listening to there's some tracks that come to my mind. Hard Act to Follow, State of Change, and The Night Comes that I kind of was listening to, and like relative to your earlier work from the '70s, I was kind of thinking you might have embraced a more '80s sound on that. Like was that like does that kind of resonate with you, that, or not really? You were just, as you said, just kind of doing what you were doing and seeing what happens.
Yeah, the latter is more just doing whatever I did. If I thought of an idea, I never ever took any notice of what was going on at the time, because you got to make it work what you do yourself. I certainly didn't consciously listen to anything that was going on at the time, but they were just things that came to me. Hard Act to Follow is certainly a track that I've always featured heavily in every show that I've done since that time. Just a song that works for me, sort of thing, and of course, the others that you mentioned as well, but there was no idea of following any trend of the whatever era, that the 80s or whatever, but just whatever I thought worked, and make it work in the best possible way.
Yeah, and you mentioned a little bit earlier your new album, or your latest album, the Devil Found Work, and yeah, and look, I had to listen to it, and yep, it's very good. It's a very good Kevin Johnson album. And look, what inspired that title? Because I was just thinking, like, that's so different to your other kind of titles. Yeah, how did the title for that album come to be? Yeah.
Well, I've always liked that expression. I like a lot of the old expressions, like old sayings that have worked well over the years. I just thought it was a good idea for that escapist sort of bad character type of song, and it all built around that, and some of the other songs on the, as I said, there were 4 songs about our grandchildren on there, and it was just a combination of songs that I thought would work at the time. I did a lot of that at home myself. And then I worked with Clive Lendich, who did the engineering. He played some of the lead guitar. We both played different guitars on it, but so it was an album that once again you go into with the songs you think at the time were the best things for that album.
Look, I wanted to bring attention to I think it's a great track off the album. I think it's probably my favorite, and that's Further Down off the latest album. And how did that kind of song come to be?
Further Down the Line. Well, that was recorded quite a long time ago. I had a favorite rhythms section in those days. I used to use Tim Partridge on bass, Russell Dunlop on drums, Jim Kelly on electric guitar, Kirk Larange on acoustic guitar, and Wayne Finlay on piano. And I had them all in the studio one day, and I think the bass player might have been different on that day because Tim had moved away or something. But and we just did it live, and then Kirk put a couple of more slides over the guitar work, and it was just one of those things. It was like a live recording, and just just worked. Yeah, well, if you like it, that's great. So that was how that one come about. It really just went down live.
Yeah.
Fantastic. I mean, are you working on anything at the moment, like album-wise, song-wise? Like, are we going to get another Kevin Johnson album anytime soon? Like, yeah.
Well, I've got enough stuff to record a whole album, or maybe close to a couple of albums. I haven't recorded as yet that I intend to, but I haven't got around to it yet. But I intend to. So definitely got those recorded. And also, I have recently a best of out, which is out through the Possum label, called Kevin Johnson, The Classics Remastered. That's out on vinyl as well as on CD. So it contains many of the past more successful or more long-lasting songs like Rock and Roll, Kedron Brook Bonnie, Shaney Boy, Man of the 20th Century, going on and on and on, sort of thing. So that's another album that's out there. Yes, yeah.
Yeah, well, it all sounds fantastic, Kevin. And look, I just want to thank you so much for making the time to talk to me today. It's been fantastic.
Thank you very much. It's been great to talk to you, and we'll meet again, no doubt. Hopefully, yes.
That was Australian singer-songwriter Kevin Johnson. To keep up with Kevin's music work, his book and his new compilation album, head to his website at rockandrolligaveyou.com. Remember to share this episode with other music fans, and if you really enjoyed this edition, let us know. Thank you for tuning in to this edition of Vinyl Vibes, and to all you music lovers out there, stay groovy.